Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're watching our channel for the first time, I would strongly recommend go and subscribe to our channel and watch all our videos. So we are making content around programming languages, AI, and all the latest technologies. So it will be helpful for your interview preparation as well as for your day-to-day coding as well. So, as part of this video, we are going to discuss on the tricky Java interview questions. We will discuss around 40 plus questions in this video. We already made part one of this video as well. There we have discussed 30 plus questions. Many of you have watched that video and liked it, and you are asking for the part two of the series. So finally, the part two is out now with 40 plus questions. And all these questions are kind of asked many times in the interview. They are tricky in nature, and many candidates will struggle to answer these questions. So if you watch this video till the end and watch the first video also till the end, so you'll get the complete benefit and you can crack the Java interview questions easily. In this video, we have covered easy, medium, hard level questions. So it will be helpful for all kinds of candidates who are preparing for the interview. Even it is useful for college grads as well, even the working professionals. So I would strongly recommend watch the video till the end. If you have not watched our part one, maybe after this video, watch our part one as well, so that get the complete benefit of it. I have already linked the part one of the video in the description. So let's get started.
Let's move to the next question. So the question is, what happens if an exception is thrown in the finally block? So here you can see, right, we have a try and finally block, and exception is thrown in both the blocks. So what happens here? Whether the try blocks throw will take a precedence or finally blocks throw will take a precedence. Let's see with an example. So here I have created try catch finally. So this is a little extended question because interviewer may ask what happens if there is a throw and catch block also. So that's why I took all the three blocks, try, catch, and finally. So we are throwing exception in all the three. It's a runtime exception. So any guesses which one will take a precedence? Is it tries one, catch one, or finally? So let's try to run and see. So you can see here exception is from the finally block. So basically, when an exception is thrown in try, catch, and finally one will take a precedence. So we already discussed finally related questions in this series. So I would suggest go and check it out because this finally is a bit tricky one. Many candidate gets confused. So and one more information, finally block, it's designed to do a cleanup task. Cleanup means, let's say some resources are opened and try. So finally is a block where we can close that to avoid the memory leaks. So that's one fundamental thing you should know. And whenever there is a throw happens from the finally, that will take a precedence. So even we discussed other examples where we try to return some value from finally also. So I would strongly recommend check it out if you have not done it. Let's go on to the next question. So the answer is exception, and the finally overrides any exception thrown in try and catch, which is very clear. So let's move on to the next question. Can memory leak occur in Java even with garbage collection? So this is an interesting question. So can memory leak occurs in Java even with garbage collection? So many people think that garbage collector is present in Java, so there is no possibility of memory leak, but it completely depends on how we code also. Even though programming language provides the garbage collection, but whether our code is efficient so that unused data will be garbage collected. Let's see. So let's see when memory leak can happen with some example. This is one of the important thing because in other videos you can say memory leak will happen, but how it will happen we'll explain in detail here. So first we'll try to understand when garbage collector will reclaim the memory or basically garbage collector is used to reclaim the unused memory. So how it will do it, let's say if you have some objects, once its use are done, if there is no reference for that object, garbage collector will pick up that and clean up the memory. But Let's say you have created some object, it's not in use, but still you are maintaining some reference. Then it will lead to memory leak. I hope you understood. So let's say there is some object which is not in use, but the reference is maintained throughout the application. So in that case, garbage collector cannot reclaim the memory from that object. So that will lead to memory leak. So in case of memory leak, what will happen? Basically, the usage of memory keep on increases. At one point, we'll see out of memory error. So that's an interesting topic. If you want to know how memory leak happens, how to debug it, you can just comment. I can take an example and explain in detail. So here in this example, right, what we are explaining is different types where memory leak can happen. I've taken very few, but there can be many. So this is to make you understand when memory leak happens. So let's take the first example. So we have this list of string, it's named as cache, and we are adding some data here. So this method, right, it is called from here. So if you see here, this method is called 10,000 times. We are adding some data. So it need not be at this line only. In real example, what will happen is, so throughout the application, we may be updating something, or in the beginning of the application itself, we load with some data. It need not be as simple as this. Some data we are loading, but what is the problem with this? So we are just loading the data, but so from the first hand, like it looks like there is no issue with that. We're just creating a list of string and we are just populating with the data. So you can ask me what is the issue? Main issue is it is declared as static. And when something is declared as static, right, it will be loaded as part of the class and it will live throughout the class. So garbage collector cannot reclaim its memory. So this is a case of memory leak when, let's say, if this cache is not used in multiple places. Maybe you initially loaded this, but you did not use it throughout the application. In that case, what will happen is, so this will still remain in the memory, but not used. So not garbage collected also. This is a case where memory leak happens. Let's say this cache is used throughout the application, then it makes sense. You don't need to basically clear it off. This is one example. Second is here, right? We are opening a file and we are performing some operation here. I've not mentioned the operation here. So, so here also, right? You may ask me what is the problem? We are just opening file, performing some action. That's it. Problem is we are loading this file.txt to the memory. So this can be huge memory. It can take the entire memory also. I've seen in my applications only some of the files which are loaded to memory led to crashes. So it's always good to close the resource after its usage. So here we are using this file. Once the operation which is specified in the try is done, we have to close it in the finally block. That's one way to do it. Second way is if I hover on it, it will tell you can use try with resource. So that will also helpful to clear the unused resource, or it will basically close the resource so that garbage collector can reclaim the memory back. I hope this is clear. So there is a third example as well. Here we have a set. Okay, we are creating a key. So I'll show you the key. So key contains ID and we have a constructor. So no equals our hash code. So when we try to add keys, let's say we are adding 1,000 here. So same as the first example, it need not be at this short. We can do it throughout the application also. So I have taken example of same ID because when there is no equals or hash code, right? When I do this new key of same ID 1,000 times, 1,000 entries will be stored in set. So ideally there should be only one entry because this value is important. So this is another case. It is added 1,000 times. It unnecessarily used the memory. So, so these are all the few possible memory leak scenarios. This is one of the classic one, the file one, and even the static is also sometimes I've seen people have done it. So I'll just show you an example how it can be prevented also. So here, right, I have created a memory leak prevention class. So what I'm doing here. So the add data still remain, but I have added a clear data or clear cache so that When it is no longer needed, we can call this and we can clear this cache. So if you go here, right? So here I have added a statement. Let's say it got created somewhere in the beginning, and I have added a statement to clear this cache as well. So this way you can help the garbage collector to reclaim the memory back. And second example regarding the read file. So here it almost looks like whatever we have seen in the previous example where memory leak was explained. But the difference is it is in the try with resource. This is called as try with resource concept. So this will take care of closing the resource once it is done. Once this execution is done in the try, right? So it will close that resource. Whatever we have opened in the try here, it will be closed. So this way we will help the garbage collector to reclaim this file's memory. So I hope you got it. So third example was related to set. So we were adding it to set with this one. So if you see, I've just overwritten the equals and hash code. With this, what will happen is if I try to add key with same value, then there will be only one entries will be stored, not 1,000. I hope this examples are clear. What I would suggest is you can play with it. Like you can create your own example for this memory leak and see how it happens and explore what tools we can use to basically debug this and how to avoid this memory leaks by using some good coding practices also. So I'd say practice this, understand this concept clearly. And along with that, one more suggestion would be like explore the different kinds of garbage collectors, how garbage collector works internally, what is the default garbage collector in each version. So that will help to understand more about it. Along with that, understand the memory part as well, how it is structured, what are the different types of memories we have. So this is the exercise for you. Do it and share your observations in the comment section. I'll evaluate that. Let's move on to the next question. So the answer is couple of examples here, like when there is unclosed resources, which we already discussed, strong references in static field, the cache example. Third one is inner class instance holding the reference to outer class. So these are all the examples where memory leak can happen. Let's move on to the next question.
So the next question is how does Java's virtual threads improve the concurrency? So let's understand with some more details. So Java introduced virtual threads in Java 21 as a major version. So virtual threads are introduced as a major feature in Java 21. So it was preview feature in Java 19, but it became a full-fledged feature in Java 21. Virtual threads mainly it helps to improve the concurrency of the application. So let's try to understand more about it. So before we deep dive into virtual thread, let's understand what is this platform thread and OS thread also. So traditional threads which we create, right, that is nothing but the platform threads. So basically, these platform threads are mapped to OS thread. It's a one-on-one relationship will be there. So creating and managing large number of platform thread is resource intensive. So there is an upper limit. You can't go beyond creating certain number of platform threads. And these platform threads are managed by OS. So that is another thing you should remember. So what is the problem with platform thread? So let's say your call is waiting on for database response or some external web service response. So what will happen is this platform thread, whatever you are seeing, this will be idle. So it can't process any other request. So what is happening is even though all our threads are occupied, if they are idle on these things, right? So this results in wastage of OS resources as well as the CPU utilization will also be not great. So that's a problem with platform threads. I hope you understand. Mainly if there are any IO calls, like for example database calls, or if there is any external service calls, the platform threads will wait and it will be in idle state. It can't be used for some other request. So that is the problem. So to solve that, virtual threads are introduced as part of Project Loom. So what is virtual threads? So as I already told, right, the platform threads are managed by the OS, but virtual threads are managed by JVM. That is the important thing. It's not managed by the operating system. They are lightweight in nature, so it consumes few kilobytes only. It's compared to platform thread, it's way more lightweight. And because of that nature, JVM can create millions of virtual threads. So that's another interesting thing. What does it mean? So if you are able to create more thread means more concurrency is possible and more CPU utilization is possible. So how virtual threads will help to scale out well? So I'll explain you. Let's say if this platform thread is waiting on, for example, some IO or external service. So this virtual thread, right, it will be marked as part and the state is maintained. This will handle some other request also at the parallelly. So when this platform threads will receive the request, again this virtual thread will be mount on this and it will respond back to the caller. So this way, this virtual threads will not go to idle state. So whenever the platform threads are in idle state, this virtual thread will go to another platform thread and can process the request, or it can handle some of the front facing request. So that is the advantage. This is how you can basically make your code more concurrent in nature and it will become scalable as well. That's another interesting thing. And it's not tied to operating system. So it's managed by JVM. JVM will have more control over it. So that is the advantage of the virtual threads. And because of that nature, right? So virtual threads are useful to design the highly scalable application. So I hope you understood. Virtual threads are managed by JVM. You can create millions of virtual threads. It's more concurrent in nature. It's lightweight. So these are all the main features of the virtual threads. What I'll do is I'll create one virtual thread for you. Here I've just created 10,000 requests, but you can increase it to any number. So I'll just run and show you just for simulation purpose. So this is how you are creating. You can go for executor dot new virtual thread per task executor. This is one way to create. There are multiple ways to create the virtual thread. So this is one way to create. So you can see it has created 9999 threads. So this is just an example. You can create even in millions. I hope you got it. Let's move on to the next question. So as we already learned, it allows running millions of lightweight threads and a slow overhead. Unlike platform thread, virtual threads don't require OS threads. So context switching is less. So this is one way to create the virtual thread. I hope you understood. So what I would recommend is after this video, go and try to create your own virtual threads. Explore it, how it works, how it is better than the platform threads. Understand the performance difference. There are a lot of articles you can find in internet where people have compared the performance difference between the virtual threads and the platform threads. I would strongly recommend go for it and see how it will differ and see the CPU utilization in both the cases. See the OS resource utilization. So this way you can understand and appreciate the virtual threads functionality. So this is how you have to make yourself stronger in these new technologies. So let's move on to the next question.
The next question. So the question is, what is record in Java? It's one of the interesting functionality which Java started supporting from Java 14 onwards. Let's see what is record and why we need record in Java. So before I explain about the record, right, one thing I would like to talk about is immutable class. So an immutable class means once the class object is created, we can't change it. If we change that, it will lead to new object creation. So that is the definition of immutable class. So let's say if you have to create an immutable class, right? You can see here, I've created a person class. We have to first make classes final, so nobody should not extend it. And we have to make this fields private and final. so that it can't be accessed and modified. And we have to just expose getters. So that's it. So this is the way we can create the immutable class. I have not covered equals hashcode toString because uh, it's required even for normal class also. So let's say we want to avoid this all this boilerplate code. Can we create this person class much more efficiently? Yes, there is a way by using records. So let's see how to do it. So here you can see, right? I've created a record. So I've given person1 because we have already created a person class. That is the reason. So I've taken first name, last name, and age. So this is how I'll create the record class. So this will create an immutable version of person one. So this will create an immutable class with the name person one. So how easy it is, right? Because compared to the first example where we had to write a lot many things, here this will even cover equals hashcode toString also, along with constructor, getters, and other things. So let's say if you want to access this, so what we can do is we can just have one main method around it. So either we can have it inside the record class or we can have it outside. We can access this record outside of this class also. So just declare this, and when you want to access a field, just do dot field name. So this is how you will basically create the record class. I'll just run this and show it to you. So you can see we have created a record class. It's an immutable class. So another thing is, because let's say if I have to, let's say update, there is no setters. There is nothing called setter here. It's only getter. So this is how I can create the immutable class. And you can ask me when these records are useful. It's useful in couple of use cases I've listed here. So you can see it is useful for DTOs, data transfer objects, and this is useful for request and response models also. It's one time updatable. And we have to, when we want to store the configuration, settings, so and a lot of other things we can use immutable class. And another great example is this will helpful to achieve the thread safety also. You don't need synchronization if you are using immutable object, because if somebody is changing, it will create new object altogether. So nobody can update the immutable object. So it is memory efficient. This can be used as a key to the hash map. It's one of the, I would say, good example for the key, because if it is immutable, then the value is kind of cached also and nobody can modify. It's a good way to create the hash map key. So these are all the examples. I hope you understood how you can create the record and how better it is compared to the previous version of creating immutable class. Let's move on to the next question. So we understood what is record, how to create it also. So basically record is a special class for immutable data. It removes all the boilerplate code like constructor equals hashcode etc. to create the immutable data. It's not for the normal data, it's only for immutable. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So here question is, what is the output of the switch case? Okay, uh, you can see this is introduced in Java 27. That's very clear because it's not a regular switch what we write. So here what is happening is it is taking an object, and all the cases, if you see, right, here we are checking if it is of type string, print this. If it is of type integer, print this. Default is this one. So this functionality is released in Java 21. This is called as pattern matching. So we'll see how we were doing the similar thing before Java 21. So how this functionality is a game changer. Let's see with an example. So here, right, before Java 21, if we had to do the similar check, what was in the question, right? So let's say we have an object we have to print by checking the type. We are doing instance of check. So if it is of string, print this. If it is of integer, print this we were doing. In Java 21, this has changed. So how we can do it in Java 21? So basically, if you see, right, we use this switch with pattern matching concept. Uh, we are taking an object as a switch parameter, and here we are having a different cases. Here it is highlighted with different color mainly because IntelliJ is saying only this will be executed because IntelliJ knows it's of type integer, but let's say this can come as a method argument. So just to be clear on that. So here what will happen is it will basically take the object and check with all the cases and print the response. How easy it is. We don't need this instance of checks and doing this typecasting. All these things are solved. So this is a easy and I would say better way to write the same logic. So it's always good to know what new functionality is released in the latest version of the any programming language so that we can write better code. I hope this is very clear. So this instance of is removed with the pattern matching, and it's a cleaner way to write the instance of checks. Let's move on to the next question. Answer is integer, and Java 21 allows pattern matching in switch statement for complex data types also. So an this is one of the interesting feature which is released in Java 21. As I always say, like we will try to cover the latest and greatest functionalities also, so that it's not just for your interview, even for your day-to-day coding also it will be useful. Let's move on to the next question. Let us move on to the next question. So the question is, can we create an object of abstract class? Many people get confused with it. Okay, can we create an object of abstract class? So let's see with an example. Here I have created an abstract class called shape. Okay, this is an abstract method called area. So can I create an object of it? So let's say if I try here, right, maybe I can call it as shape only and new shape. If you see here, right, it is showing this uh, curly brackets because it is expecting me to override it. So if I just say this, right, this will not work. So it is clearly saying shape is an abstract class and it has an abstract method also. Even if I remove this also, that error remains same. So basically abstract class object cannot be instantiated. I hope that's clear because it's abstract in nature. It's not fully clear. It's not fully concrete. So you can't create an object of the abstract class. So let's say if this abstract class is extended by another class, can it create an object? So let's say I want to create an instance of the circle here. Can I do it? So let's say if I say circle, new circle, I will still get an error here only because it's clearly saying circle must either declared as abstract or implement the abstract method area. So it's clearly throwing an error. So let's say if I create this area method, then that error will go away. So I'll just return something. So I'll just create a double area, for example, and I'll just return it just for example. So it works. So there is no error. So which means either class should be concrete to create an object. If it is an abstract class, you can't basically create an object. So here if you see, right, circle is extending shape. So circle is also now an abstract class because it is not overriding the area. Let's say instead of this, there was, for example, a concrete method, no abstract method, some implementation here. Then we don't need to override anything. Okay, this is another example you have to understand. So here I have created an example method which is concrete in nature. There is an implementation here. Previously, when I had the shape, previously when I had the area method, that was not having implementation. That was abstract in nature. Now, if you see, right, there is no error. So this is an interesting thing. So if a class is extending the abstract class, then it has to override the abstract methods of it. If there is no abstract methods, no need to override, it will work fine. So I hope you understood about abstract class. Can we create an instance of it? What happens if an abstract class is extended by another class? What are the different variations possible? So this is how interviewer will also ask, and it will be useful to know the fundamentals clearly. So it is helpful to write better code. So don't just aim for the interview. This is for your learning and improving the fundamentals also. So I hope you got it. Let's see the answer and move on to the next question. So the answer is like in Java, abstract class serve as a blueprints for other classes and cannot be instantiated directly. Attempting to create an object of an abstract class will result in a compilation error. So I hope you saw that also. It was throwing an error. Let's move on to next question. Let us move on to next question. So the question is what happens if a static variable is modified in one object? So question is clear, I think. What happens if a static variable is modified in one object? Let's see with an example. So the question is what happens if a static variable is modified in one object? So first thing you should know is static is bound to a class, not to any object. So it will be loaded as part of the class loader only. So that's the first thing you should know. It is not attached to any object. So if you modify even it in object also, it will basically reflect in all the other objects because it's a class level property. So here I have created two objects, object 1 and object 2 of type the static example. And here you can see I have a static variable and instance variable. So with object 1 dot instance variable, I'm updating to 30 and static variable, I am directly changing to 50. And when I try to print it, what will happen? So object 1 static variable I'm printing, instance variable I'm printing, same thing for object 2 I'm doing. So let's run and check. So here you can see, right, object 1 static variable is 50, object 2 static variable is 50 because static is bound to a class. So here only it is updated. Ideally you don't need an object to access it also. If I just update it right. So this is how you can directly access. So if you want to access this static outside of the class in some other class, then you can use class name dot static and you can perform operation on it. I hope you got it. So if you want to access a static outside of this class, then you can use class name dot this static variable and you can perform the operation. I hope it's very clear to you. So static is bound to a class. Let's move on to the next question. So answer we know already, like since static variable is bound to a class or belongs to a class, all objects share the same copy. Any change in one instance variable reflects in all the other instances. I hope it's very clear. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can we declare constructor static? This is an interesting question. So I'm not going with an example here. I'll clearly explain orally. But if you want, I would say create an example and understand better. This is an exercise for you. So answer is constructor cannot be static because constructor is used to create an object. So if you make constructor static, right? Static means that is bound to a class, but constructor is meant to create an object. So you can't make constructor static. So it should be non-static so that objects should be created and constructor works at the instance level and it leads to compilation error. That is another thing you should know because somebody may say it is not allowed, but we don't get an error. so the real factors, you will get compilation error also. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So let us move on to the next question. So the question is, can we force garbage collection in Java? Even though we know about garbage collection, I don't think many of you have even thought through, can we force the garbage collection? So let us try to understand with an example in detail. So this is one of the important thing, okay? Many of the times you will find theory for this, but when you know the practical real coding part, then it will be registered in your memory. So I don't think you will find many tutorials around it. So that's why I always recommend to watch our videos till then. So let's see, can we force garbage collection in Java? Created a GC example where I have two objects, object 1 and object 2. Here, basically, I'm logging, like requesting for garbage collection. We are calling .gc, okay, system.gc. So this is the method to call the garbage collection, but it's not guaranteed, okay. So it's clearly saying there is no guarantee that this effort will recycle any particular number of unused objects or reclaim any particular amount of space. So it is just a request to the JVM that reclaim the unused memory. So you can ask me how it can reclaim, because if you see, right, I've created two objects and I'm assigning it to null, means there is no further reference or usage of it. So as we already know, garbage collector can reclaim when the object is not in use. So here we are forcibly calling it to do it. And there is a method called finalize, okay? So what will happen is when a garbage collector tries to remove the or reclaim the memory of the object, it will call finalize method of that object. So this finalize is from the java.lang object. So this method will be called by garbage collector before collecting the object or reclaiming the object's memory. So here we can have some cleanup steps, okay? So, but I have added a lock statement here just to make you clearly show you whether the garbage collector, whatever we are requesting here, is kicked in or not, ran or not. So, so this is a class where two objects are created, reference are nullified, calling the GC, and the finalize also we are doing. So this finalize, right, you might have read 100 times in theory, but I don't think you have seen a practical example of finalize. So this is the example for that. So let's try to run it and see whether garbage collector is called. Here you can see we have first requested garbage collection. That's what here it is coming. .gc we are calling. Finalize we are overriding. The garbage collector is called because you can see I just printed the this. So it's basically printed both the objects here. So as I already told, this is just a request. There is no guarantee that garbage collector should run. And it's not recommended also to call the garbage collector because created by Java when to call the garbage collector, reclaim the memory. So I hope you understood the garbage collection part. Here we are calling and the request is honored, but it's not guaranteed that all the times this request is honored. And you understood the finalize also. This will be called before the object getting garbage collector. So we can add some cleanup steps to clean up some resource of the object also, so that garbage collector can remove the object from the memory and reclaim the memory back. I hope it's very clear to you. So what I would recommend is try to write this code, understand it clearly so that you'll understand how we can call the garbage collector and go through the library, because whenever you are using any library, understand it, because what many people do is they'll just call .gc, but they'll not understand what is the Java doc says, how it works. So understand that clearly. And as I already told you in the some other video also, as I already told while explaining some other problem statement also, understand what are the different garbage collectors are present, what is the active one for the version you are using. So that will help you to improve your knowledge on garbage collectors. So one thing I want to add is the finalize, right? This is deprecated. You can clearly say this method is deprecated. marked for renewal. So from Java 9 onwards, this finalized is deprecated. So this is another thing. Even though you are studying finalize since ages, so finalize is kind of deprecated also. That is another thing you should know. And it is replaced with what? It's replaced with something called cleaner. Cleaner is released in Java 9. You can see since 9 it is saying. So this is used to clean the object, and there are examples also. And this cleaner is also kind of a request only. So cleaner is same as finalize. So here you can basically clean up your object uh, details before garbage collector is getting called. So this is the level of depth we go. Okay, in other tutorials, right, you can see finalize still explained, but finalized is no more used after Java 9 onwards because it is marked for deprecation. So cleaner is an alternative. So understand these concepts clearly. This is how you can update your knowledge base. So here I have created an example for cleaner also, because finalize is deprecated in Java 9. So the in latest version you can see cleaner only from Java 9 onwards. So this is just for understanding. I'm not going to explain in depth. So here I have a resource holder as a class. Just to avoid the repetition of the name, instead of GC example, I've taken resource holder. It has some resource, and we need this cleanable object. Okay, and what we are doing is here we are registering this object with the cleanup, how this object should be cleaned up. That details we are registering here. Similar way in finalize we were overriding, right? In finalize method we were doing the cleanup step. So here what we have to do is we have to register the object, and we have to specify how it should be cleaned up with the cleaner class. So cleaner class, we have to first create an instance, and after that we have to register the object and how it should be cleaned up. The details we are specifying here. And if we don't do it, so the JVM will take care of some automatic steps. So explicitly, if you want to do some specific cleanup, specific removal of the objects, this is how you can do it. And once we make this holder as null, so reference is removed, we are calling system.gc. So ideally this holder should be garbage collected. So we are waiting for 1000 milliseconds, so that will give chance to JVM to reclaim through the garbage collector. If you see, it has just created the resource. So that cleanup part is not executed. So we are not seeing the cleanup of the resource. So it's a request, as I said. Same with the previous examples I explained here. Also, we are just requesting. It's up to the JVM to honor it. Let's move on to the next question. So the answer is there is no way we can force the garbage collection. So we can call this system.gc. It's a request. So JVM may take that request or discard. It's up to the JVM. So that's the answer. Let's move on to the next question. Move on to the next question. So the question is, what is thread local? So we may not have used thread local often, but it's good to know about the thread local when it can be used. Let's see with some example. Let us try to understand the thread local with an example. Okay. So thread local is a variable which is local to each thread. So I'll just repeat. Thread local is a variable to each thread. So each thread can have one dedicated variable for itself. That is thread local. You can ask me what happens with the regular variable what we create. So that is shared across the thread. So this is dedicated to each thread. Each thread can store some value in it, and it can be used for further processing. So I hope you understood. Thread local is local to each thread. It will maintain its own copy, and it can be used for some further processing of the thread. Okay. Here I have created a thread local, and it's initialized with 0. At first thread, right, I'm setting it to 10. So I'm printing it here. Second thread, I'm just printing the initial value. Some may say it's already updated in thread 1, it should be 10 here, and we are updating again here, it should be 20 here. But ideally what will happen is, as I said, this thread local is local to each thread. Whatever we are updating here, it will be visible only within this thread. Here the value will be 0 because it's initialized with 0. So I hope it's clear. Whatever the value we are setting here will not reflect here. It is local to each thread. I'll just run and show you the result. You can see thread 2 value is 0, and after that we update it to 20, and thread 1's local value is 10. Like, you can ask me, can we add a initial statement here? I can do it. So let's run and show you. So here you can see, right, both thread 1 and thread 2 starting with 0. Maybe I'll just run and show you. We make a different combination. So here same thing, thread 2 0, thread 2 updated to something, but thread 1's value is still 0 here. So you can see it's a local copy to each thread. Every time when you run, you'll see different results because threads, it will not run in the same order. So this is to store the local data for each thread. So some of the use cases are, for example, if it is a session in some web application, you want to store some session details or user details. So here you can see we are storing the user detail here. So this is kind of used within this thread. And another important thing is we should remove that entry once the usage is done, because this will lead to memory leak. So if you don't release the memory after its usage, it will again lead to memory leak. And so it will introduce tight coupling also. It is not recommended. The second example is we are using the simple date format, which is non-thread safe, because if every thread starts to update object of type this, right, it will lead to inconsistent values. So we are basically storing this as a thread local. So here each thread will have its own copy and modify by its own way. Okay, so this is another way. You can see each thread gets its own formatter. No interference or synchronization is required. That's another thing. And same thing in this one. So we are using it to generate some thread ID, unique thread ID. So we are using the atomic integer, and within the thread local, we are incrementing it. So each thread will get its own unique count. So I hope you understood different use cases. Normally people will not go in depth, but I am explaining because you should know what is thread local in detail, but it's not heavily used. Let us see the answer and move on to next question. So we understood thread local variable basically provides each thread its own isolated copy of the variable, avoiding the synchronization issues. So, and we understood also how to create. You can see thread local dot with initialization. We are initializing this. Understand the syntax also. So let us move on to next question. Let's move to next question. So the question is, what is the difference between streams findFirst and findAny method? Even though we have used these two methods in our code, many of us don't know what is the difference. So let us understand with some examples. So here I've created a list of numbers, and we are using findFirst here. I'll first start with the explanation of findFirst. So what we are doing here is we are filtering all the numbers which are greater than 2. In that, get the first number out of it. So we'll start streaming the numbers. We are interested in the first number which is greater than 2. And that's what we are printing here. Then what we are doing with the findAny. findAny is good for the parallel streams. So findFirst is good for the single stream. findAny is good for the parallel stream. In that, let's say the requirement is we have to find any number which is greater than 2, not the first number. I hope you got it. Find any number which is greater than 2 and print it. So there, find any is very useful, because here if you see, right, what will happen is the given numbers is split it into multiple streams. Maybe one range of numbers will be first stream, second range will be in the second stream, third range will be in the third stream. Parallelly computation happens. Parallelly we will check if there is any number which is greater than 2, and we'll short circuit and print the result. But let's say if we want to know the first number which is greater than 2, then this is the thing. This is a sequential thing. So we'll go one after the other and check and print it. This is parallel in nature, faster in nature. This is useful for larger data set processing, but there should not be a need of finding first kind of a requirement here. Let's run and check the result. Here you can see, right, we got 3 as the answer for the find first and 10 as the answer for find any. Because in case of find any, we are not worrying about the order. We are worrying about any number which is greater than 2. I hope you got it. So you can use find any when there is no order is required. Find first when you want to know the first number, first string, or first object which satisfies the filter. So I hope you got it. Let's move on to the next question. So the answer is find first always returns first element. Find any can return any element with matching criteria. So it's useful in parallel streams. I hope you got it. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can a record class implements an interface? So this is an interesting question. Let's try to deep dive into this question with an example. Here I have a record called customer with name and amount, and I have this billable as an interface. I'm implementing billable. There is no error. It's perfectly fine because record is also a type of a class. Class can implement the interface without any issues. So this is the first part of the question. Let's say what will happen is normally in interview, we'll make it more complex. Follow-up maybe, let's say if this is class, can a record extend? Can a record extends another class? No, it's basically complaining about this missing body because it's a normal class. In normal class, we should have some body. We can't have an abstract method. So that's why it was complaining. That is fixed. So there is some logic here. Okay. So there is some logic here. Okay. We are getting an error here. Record cannot extend another class. You can ask me, if record is a class, class can extend other class, right? That is the thing we know. But why record class cannot extend another class? So this should be the follow-up question which should come to your mind. Okay, because if it is a record is a class, then it should follow the behavior of a class. It is following behavior of the class, but what will happen is record class internally extends java.lang.record already. So whenever you create this record class, right, it internally extends this java.lang.record. So one extend is already done. So as you know, a class can extend only one class, no more than one class, to avoid the diamond shape problem. So that's why a record cannot extend another class. So this is the second variation of the problem. So interviewer may ask another variation. Is it possible for a normal class to extend the record? So even though we know the concept fully, we'll get confused here. We'll say it is possible because record is also a class. So normal class can extend the record class. But if you know clearly, right, record is a special type of class. It is used to create an immutable object. Means what? Class will be declared as final internally. So we can't extend the final class. This is how you have to think. So a class cannot extend the record. If I hover on it, you will get that error. Cannot inherit from the final customer, because for us it is a record here. Internally it is a final class to make it immutable. So none of the other class can extend the record class, because what will happen is even though we know the concept, right, when interviewer asks the follow-up question, we get confused, we'll give the wrong answer. So this is how you have to make your fundamentals strong. Then only you can work well and answer well in the interviews also. Let's move on to the next question. I hope it's very clear. Let's move on to the next question. So answer is record can implement an interface, but it cannot extend another class because record is already implicitly extending java.lang.record. I hope it's very clear. Let's move on to the next question. Let us move on to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between arrays as list and new array list? So arrays as list is basically used to create list from an array, and using new array list also you can create array list. So let's try to understand the difference in detail. So here I've created arrays as list and new array list, two examples. So we have used arrays as list many times in our code to create the list from the array. So let us understand the difference today, okay? So first thing is go inside this arrays as list, see the definition of it or see the Java doc of it to understand what it does. So basically this arrays as listed, it returns the fixed size list. It is modifiable in nature, but you can't change the size of the return list. So I hope you understood. So basically you can modify the list, you can update the values, but you can't change the size of a list. Like you can't add it or you can't remove it. So that is what Java's arrays as list does. I hope it's very clear. Let's try to understand with an example. Here we are having an array and we are creating arrays as list. The first example here, right? I'm updating the index 1 with x. This is perfectly fine. It modifies. Modification is perfectly fine, but provided length should not be changed. So here we are printing that list. Okay. And second thing is here we are trying to add an element to it. We should get an unsupported operation exception because modification without changing the length is fine. With changing the length will create an unsupported operation. But let's say if you go with a plain ArrayList creation, right? This will not cause any issue. You can modify, you can update the length is perfectly fine. I'll just run and show you the result. You can see, right? I'm getting unsupported operation exception at line number 15, where I'm trying to update by adding a new element. So this is not recommended. So let's comment this and run again to show the rest of the code. With normal array list, you can basically update the values. You can add an element, delete an element. That's perfectly fine. So whenever you are using arrays as list, be cautious. It will give you the fixed size list. If you have a requirement where you have to change the length, then don't go for it. Let's move on to the next question. Difference is clear. So arrays as list will create the fixed size list, and new array list is creates a mutable copy. You can do whatever you want here. Here you can't change the size of it. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, how does HashMap handles collisions after Java 8? So before I explain this, we should understand what is collision here. So basically HashMap, right? I'll first explain till Java 8 what was happening and what has changed from Java 8. So basically what will happen is whenever you want to store an element in the hash map, internally first hash code will be calculated based on the key you are storing. Okay. So internally hash map contains a buckets, and each it's an array of buckets. Okay. Each bucket will point to a linked list. So first what will happen is when you want to store, right? First it will check based on the hash code what is the location in the array of buckets. Let's say if it is 0 in the bucket, so 0 will point to one linked list. So first entry it will directly go and store it in the linked list. But so let's say if you want to store another entry in the hash map, and let's say the hash code of that entry is also 0. So what will happen is first it will go and check the hash code and see the linked list. If there is already an entry present, then it will compare its keys. If it is same, then it will override the existing linked list entry. Otherwise, it will create a new node. So this is how it will be worked. So basically, every time there is a collision, this is called as collision. So if two keys with same hash key will create collisions, so the new entry will be added in the linked list corresponding to it till Java 8. So the problem is, so we normally say, right, hash maps get complexity is O of 1. It's not always. O of 1 is a best case complexity. Why? Because let's say you want to retrieve some value, right? First, you will get the hash code. From hash code, you will see the linked list. If there is already linked list formed, you have to traverse the whole linked list in worst case to get the value. So the complexity will be O of n in the worst case till Java 8. But what has changed in Java 8? So what Java 8 has done is, instead of storing it in the linked list, if the size of the linked list is crossing 8, if there are 8 collisions happened for a bucket, then it will convert that into red black tree. So with the red black tree, the worst case complexity is reduced to O of log n from O of n. So this is the advantage. I hope you got it. In case of collision, if the length of the linked list is greater than 8, then the red black tree is created and the new records are added there. So complexity will become of log n. So this is the improvisation to handle the collision. Let's move on to next question. So let us move on to next question. So the question is, what are the advantages of collectors to unmodifiable list, which is introduced in Java 10 onwards? So what are the advantages of collectors to unmodifiable list? We'll try to understand what it does, and after that we'll discuss the advantages also. Let's go with an example. So here in this example, right, I have created an array list using arrays as list. As you know, this will give the fixed length array list and you can't change the length of it, but you can modify, update this values. This is perfectly fine. Say I have a requirement where I don't want anyone to change this values or even the size, both. Can I do that? Yes, you can do it with this unmodifiable list method. So here you can see, right, we are streaming on the numbers. We are mapping, like basically some multiplication we are doing on every value and collecting it to unmodifiable list. So this is an unmodifiable list. And just for the demo purpose, we are trying to modify it and show you whether it works or not. So let's run and see the outcome of it. So you can see we are getting an unsupported operation exception for this line number 19. That's the first thing. Even if I comment and go for next one also, I'll get the error. So this is how you can create an unmodifiable list. This is introduced in Java 10, but if I hover on it, right, it's suggesting something. Replace this with toList. This toList is introduced in Java 16 onwards. So what it does, this will also basically helpful to create an unmodifiable list only. That's why ID was suggesting. This is basically, you can say it will use the unmodifiable list internally only. So this is a cleaner way, better way. This is introduced in Java 16. So that's why I always recommend learn and explore the latest versions of the programming language or framework so that there may be an enhancements to the existing requirement or there may be some new functionalities also. It's good to know the new things because many of the people when I interact, they'd say, I'm still using Java 8. It's okay for your application, for your office, you may be using Java 8, but for your career growth, you can explore the latest version, understand what new things are introduced. So that's how you can basically appreciate the newer functionalities. So even I'll just run this because I've added two lists just to show you the same behavior. So I'm getting the unsupported operation exception. So I hope you got it. If you want to create an immutable list, you can go with toList or to unmodifiable list. Immutability is helpful to achieve the thread safety. That's one of the biggest use case. So let's move on to next question. So main advantage is it is used to create an immutable list, prevents accidental modification, provides thread safety. I hope you understood. Let us move on to the next question. So the question is, what is string template in Java 21? So string template, right, which is introduced as part of Java 21 as preview, and it was continued in Java 22 also as preview, but from 23 onwards, this is not available. So this preview functionalities, right, it's kind of an experimentation. It may or may not become a full-fledged feature. Since it was available in 21 and 22 of the Java version as a preview, I have taken this question. And if you hover on this, right, it will clearly say it's a preview API, may be removed in future release. It's already removed in the latest versions, but since it was available in 21-22, I'm taking this example. So basically, Java string template is used to create a string sentence with variables in it efficiently. So here you can see, right, this is without string template. I'll show you how we were doing without string template and how it was done with string template also. So here you can see today's weather is, there is some variable we have enforced with the temperature of some variable. We were basically concatenating. This is one way we were creating it. Second way is we can use a string format. So in string format, you have to have the placeholder like percentage %s, and you should specify this as a uh, placeholder replacement. Okay. And another way is you can use the message format also the same as string format, only the changes. Here we were using percentages. Here it is used as curly bracket and number of arguments. And another way is the string builder. This one you know, right? Append, and here you have to specify the variable and rest of the string part. With the string template, it was like this inline you could have done. Like, so here you can see, right? Slash, and within the brackets, you can specify the variable name. It looks almost like a concatenation, but little better than that. That's the only thing. I'll just run and show you. So you can see today's weather is warm and with a temperature 25 degrees Celsius. So this is how string template was used. Since it is not continued after 23, so you don't need to worry. So this is about the string template. Let's move on to the next question. So it basically allows inline expression in strings without concatenation. So that is how it was done. So I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can records be permitted subclasses of sealed classes or interfaces? So sealed classes are introduced in Java 17. So can records be permitted subclass of the sealed class or interface? Let's understand this with example. So here I have created a sealed interface, okay, with the name shape. Permits have taken these classes. So basically sealed class or interface are designed to control who can extend or implement the class or interface. So it's basically controlling the inheritance. So previously what was happening is, so all the public classes, right, it can be inherited by any other class. But with the sealed class or interface, you can control, you can tell who can basically extend. So you can specify this permits and control that. Okay. So the question was, can a record part of the permitted list of the sealed class or interface? With sealed interface, yes, you can see the circle, rectangle, and square is of type record, and it is added as type of permits, and we are not seeing an error. It's perfectly fine. So let's say if this was class, what could have happened? So here we have to make it to extends. Okay, let's change all this to extends. We are getting this error mainly because record cannot extend this. Okay, so main reason is invalid permits class must be directly extend shape is what you're saying. So why this error is coming? Mainly because so they have already extended the java.lang.record. So one extension is already done. So they can't extend more than one class because that's the rule of a Java. So class can extend only one class. So that's why that is this not allowed. So we are getting an error. So a sealed interface can permit records, but sealed class cannot permit the records. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So answer is records can be permitted subclass of a sealed interface, but not for sealed classes in Java. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is what happens if a class implements two interfaces? They both have same default method. So that is the twist. Okay. So a class is implementing two interfaces. They both have same default methods. So let's see and understand this in detail. So what happens if a class implements two interfaces and they both contains default method of same name? So this is not a regular day-to-day coding thing. Okay, we may not encounter this situation often, but in interview this can be a tricky question. But it's good to understand the concept clearly, so it will be useful for day-to-day coding also. Here C is implementing A and B, and both are having greet as a default method. So when I hover on it, right, it will clearly say inherits unrelated defaults. So it's basically compiler will not be aware which one to implement. Let's say if class was implementing A, there was no problem at all. It was directly using its default method. But it is basically implementing both. So it's getting confused what to do. So we have to implement it. We have to implement the default method here. And here we are calling a.support.greet. If you want to get the B's one, we can call B here. Or let's say we want to replace both of this with some other our own overridden thing that also we can specify here. So here we can specify our own logic here. This is also perfectly fine. So basically, if a class is implementing two interfaces which contains same default name, then you have to override it. So that is the expectation. So let us say, so here these default methods are also containing same return types. Let's say if it was int here. Okay, I'm just returning int here. Now problem difficulty increased. So now can we apply the same overriding behavior here? No, because both of these methods containing different return types. Let's say even if I hover on it, right, and click on the implement, it will not work. Even it is implementing, it is still throwing an error. See, it's saying that it clashes with the greet method of B because B is containing int return type. So it's not possible at all. And both the return type should be same. Is it the case always? That's the next question interviewer may ask. So let's say here instead of void we had number. Okay, and we are returning number here. And same thing here instead of int it is integer. Here let's say instead of int it was integer. Then return one I'm doing. Now if I hover on it, right, and implement, it works. There is no error. Do you know why? Mainly because this integer is a subclass of number. So if I go inside here, right, you can see integer extends number. So integer is a subclass of number. So when there is a superclass and subclass combination in return type, then you can override. It's perfectly allowed. So when there are two unrelated return types, we can't override. So three cases we discussed. So first case, return types are matching, that is void. Even if it is void, integer, anything is fine. It should match. Second one, void and int combination we tried. We couldn't override. Third one, number and integer combination. Superclass and subclass combination. It worked. I hope you understood different variations of the same problem statement. So I would recommend go and practice and understand it better. Let's move on to the next question. So subclass must override the conflicting method, otherwise it results in a compilation error. So this is very clear to us. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is the output of the below code? So we have four integer variables, a, b, and xy. A, b is of value 127, xy is of value 128, and there is some comparison happening. So let's understand this in detail. Here in this example, right, we have four integer variables, and first two are valued 127, second two are 128, and we are trying to compare these variables using double equals. First of all, comparing double equals, right? It will just compare the object address or reference. But here what is happening? So when I do this comparison of a equals to b, here I'm getting true, but here I'm getting false. Let's say if this was something else, maybe for example, I'll take two more things. So maybe I will name it as 126 and 126 also. And here I'll compare with C and D. So first two will return true. The last one will return false. We'll see the result first. After that, we'll understand why. So first two is returning true, but last one is returning false. Why? Because all of them are doing the same comparison only. Ideally, double equals is not used for the object comparison, but we are doing it. It is working here. So why it is working is whenever you assign some value to an integer. So when you go inside this integer class, it uses value of method where what it does is if the value is within the range of minus 128 to plus 127, then it will cache the value. So there is an integer cache. So whenever you try to assign a value to an integer, what it does is if the value is between 128 minus 128 to plus 127, it is served from the cache. So it will not create a new object. If you see the clear case here, so it will take low and high. So this is basically minus 128. This is basically 127. And if it is within this range, it will return the cached object. So if I go here, integer cache, it will basically return this integer cached object. I hope it's very clear to you. So because of that, what is happening is when you initialize with 127, 126, we'll get the cached object. So even for a equals to 127 and 127 of b, so both of which will get the same object. So here also it's the same thing. Here also, here the problem is it is 128. Cached value range is what? It is minus 128 to plus 127. But this plus 128 is not in this range. So we'll get two different objects for x and y here. When you do double equals, we are getting false. So the ideal way to compare is using dot equals. Dot equals we have to use. This is foolproof of any value range. So this is what we have to do. And here if I have to add the same thing. So here also I've used dot equals. Now I should get true for all. Okay. So this is working fine. This double equal is useful for primitive type. Let's say if it is 10 here and t is equals to 10, then if I would have used s equals to t, then we will get true always. So I hope you got it. So I hope you understood why it was working for 127 and 126. Why not for 128? This is an interesting concept to know because this will give an information like what libraries does to optimize and give better performance sometimes. Let's move on to the next question. So the answer is, as you know, for minus 128 to plus 127, it will reuse the objects for the performance optimization. Values beyond this range, integer will create new objects and it lead to return false result. So because of that, we got the false result for 128 comparison. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what happens when we call run instead of start method in a thread? Let's try to understand this in detail. So I have created a thread class here. So I'm trying to call run and start method. Okay. So many of you might aware when you are studying, thread will started when you call dot start method, and that will internally call the run method. But what happens if we call the run method directly? Will it start a thread? So this is one question I think many of you not discussed. So this is one thing you should know clearly. So if I go inside the start, right, it will clearly say it schedules this thread to begin the execution. The thread will execute independent of the current thread. Okay. So let's try to understand what happens here. So when you call run and start, for that I'll just run this code and show you. Here, right, in the output, you can see running in main thread. So what we are trying to do is here thread.current thread name we are printing. So here it's showing thread.0 when the start is called. So when run is called, it is printing, it's running in main thread. And when start is called, it's running in thread 0. That's what we are printing here. So basically, as you know, when you create an application, first thread which is getting created is a main thread, and the last thread which is going to be shut down is also main thread. So that's why we are seeing run was basically invoked from the main method. So it's saying this is basically running in the main only. But when you call the start, this has created a new thread and it called the run method. So that's why we are seeing a different thread name altogether here. So which means thread is created only here, not here. This is just a method call. Okay. I hope that's very clear to you. Next thing is, whenever you're creating a thread, don't extend the thread. This is not recommended because class can extend only one class. So if you just extend, then you will lose that. Okay. So for that, advice is go with implements runnable, because runnable advantage is runnable is an interface. Okay. Class can implement any number of interfaces, but it can extend only one class. So it's always good to use implements to create the thread so that you will have one more uh, class to extend. So you can have an option to extend another class. That's the advantage. So I'll just complete this code. Thread. So I'll just pass this to a thread. So we can call it as new thread only. So let me take out this. So this is how it will be. You will get the same result, but this is for a better practice purpose I've explained. So you can see the same result. I hope you understood. Run will not create any new thread. It will just call a method. Start is the way to create new thread. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So calling a run method executes in the main thread, not a separate thread. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is how to add log statements in Java streams. So this is an interesting question. Let's try to understand with an example. Here, in this example, we have bunch of strings. Okay. So we are filtering those strings whose length is greater than 4 and we are converting to uppercase and we are printing. We are putting into a list. Okay. In real use case, this logic can be complex. It is very difficult to understand with one shot. Okay. So, and another thing is log statements are always helpful to debug any issues. Okay. So for that, we have to add proper log statement in our application. So here, right, how we can add the log statement? Is there any way or functionality which is supported by streams with which we can add the log statement? Let's try to understand that in detail. So you can use something called peek. Okay. Peek is used to add the log statements. So here you can see after the first step, I have added one peek. Here I'm printing what was the original string. Here I'm printing what is filtered, and here I'm printing what is converted to uppercase. So this way I can clearly understand what is happening at each step. So it's very easy to debug also. We will not miss out anything. So here you can see, right, at the first original was apple, filtered was also apple, and it is mapped to APPLE. So here you can see original was apple, filtered was also apple, here mapped because here uppercase we are doing, here it is apple in uppercase. So this is what it is. So when you add a log statement, you'll see in a different color. So that's why bit difficult to follow. So here it's same thing with banana. Here it is in uppercase format. I hope you understood. Peek is very useful in debugging the streams. So whenever you're writing your code, add relevant log statements so that it will be easy to debug when some issue comes. So let's move on to the next question. So peek can be used for debugging and to add the log statements. Okay. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's see the next question. So the question is, how does Java optimize string concatenation? So this is an interesting concept. Many of you have not explored because we do this concatenation with plus, but we don't know underlying what happens internally. We don't know the underlying concept. Let's understand with an example. So here, right, we have this A plus B plus C. Okay, this is what string concatenation is all about. So till Java 9, what was happening was uh, JVM at the compilation time only, it was converting this A plus B plus C to string builder append method. Okay, so I'm repeating again, till Java 9, JVM was using string builder to do this conversion. So whenever you declare this, when you compile this, so Java was creating this, it was part of the bytecode. When you do a compilation, so it was converting string builder, adding it to the bytecode. And so in Java 9, there is a concept introduced called invoke dynamic. So basically, some method calls are resolved at the runtime using invoke dynamic. So that got introduced in Java 9. Same concept is used to basically handle this case as well. So what will happen is in Java 9, so when you compile this line, you will get this line only. But in the runtime, what will happen is JVM will decide whether it has to use string builder or it has to use some bit manipulation strategy or any other optimized strategy to concatenation. So with this advantage is in Java's, I mean till Java 9, this was part of the bytecode. It was increasing the bytecode size. But with this invoke dynamic concept and dynamic resolution, so we are just storing this one only in the bytecode. There is no change in the bytecode size. Only the change is the way it is handled at the runtime. So this is more performant because JVM will decide what optimizing strategy works out well for the use case. So which is more performant in nature and it will reduce, so it will not even increase the bytecode size also. I hope it's very clear to you. This is one of the interesting concept. Okay, I'm going in depth because you should understand this clearly. I think nobody will go so much depth and people may find it I'm going a little slower. My main intention is to make you understand the internals clearly. I can also explain it to one line and I can move on, but it will not add any value. That is the main thing. That's why I always suggest learners to watch my video till then to get the complete benefit of it. Even though it sounds, looks little slower, but you will appreciate at the end. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So basically Java replaces plus with string builder internally for efficiency till Java 9. Java 9 onwards, it uses concatenation strategy, which it decides at the runtime. So Java 9 onwards, concatenation strategy decided at the runtime. Okay. So I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's see the next question. So the question is, can we modify final array list? This is an interesting question. Many student, many learners will make mistake in this problem. I've seen out of my experience. Let's understand with some examples. I have created a class to demonstrate the final keyword in detail. Okay. So I have this x equals to 10 is declared here. But let's say if I want to change this to 20 or 12, whatever, it says you cannot assign a value to final variable. What it means? You can't change the value of a final variable. You will get compilation error. Okay. I hope this is clear. But let's say I have this final list of strings. Okay. Can I add or modify this list? So let's say I'm adding, for example, ABC here, and let's say I want to remove something. Remove ABC. Is this allowed? So this is where many learners will get confused. They'll say it's declared as final. We can't modify this. Is it the case? So we are not seeing any errors if you see, right? There is no compilation error. So there are no compilation error. I can run and show you also. We can perfectly add and remove an element from the final collection type. This is perfectly allowed. Let's say I have, for example, final int array. So I have assigned 1, 2, 3 here. Can I modify this? Like let's say if I want to make it to 4, this is perfectly allowed. So what it means is final for a primitive type, it's a constant for value. Final with collection or with array, here we can change the value. Then what we can't change? Let us say I have to assign, for example, new array list to this one. This is not allowed. I'm getting an error now. Because if a collection or an array is declared with final, you can't change its reference, but value can be updated and modified. This is perfectly allowed. So crystal clear clarity is required here. Otherwise, many students will get confused. They'll say we can't change it, but final behavior is you have to understand how final behaves with different types of data. You have to understand how final behaves with primitive types, how final behaves with collections also. And so I have some more examples here. So I have created a class parent and I have created a final method here. So when I try to extend this parent, right, I'm getting compilation error because I can't override the final method. So final with method we can't override. Okay. Final with class we can't extend. Here we are getting cannot inherit error. So final we understood extensively in this examples. Okay, I'll just explain it one last time. So final with primitive type we can't change value. Final with collection, final with an array, we can change the value, and a final with class, we can't extend. Final with method, we can't override. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So basically, you can modify a final array list in Java. Declaring an array list as final means that reference to a list cannot be changed. But you can change the content of the list, such as adding, removing, updating is perfectly fine. I hope it's very clear. Let's move on to the next question.
Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can we create a generic array in Java? So can we create a generic array in Java? So let's try to understand this with an example. So before we understand about like whether we can create an array using generics or a generic array, first let's understand about generics and its concepts. After that, we'll try to answer this question. So in Java, when you create a collection, right, you don't need to specify the type actually. There is no enforcement from Java. Let's say I can have something like example here. I'll just come on this guy. I can have something like this, and this perfectly allowed to create an array list this way. So I can add, for example, I can add an integer here. This is also allowed. I can add even the string as well. That is also allowed. So this is the default behavior. So this is the default behavior. Okay. So there is no type enforcement by default on collection types by Java. But what is the problem with this issue? So you can clearly see, right? We are able to add even the integer, we are able to add the string. But when we try to retrieve, right? Example, let's say if I do get of 1, what will happen is, do you know what it returns? It returns an object. If I hover on it, you can see it basically returns an object. I'll just go here and show you. So what it does is it returns an element specified at the position. Here we have not specified any type. It will return an object. Like let's say if I, so here I can't say whether it is an integer or anything. Okay, if I just say like this, it will ask for the typecasting. So when I do this, it will ask typecast to int. Let's say if I mention it as string, it will say typecast to string. So this is the problem. So because of this, we will see the typecast exception, because if you start storing different types of data in a same collection, then whenever you are retrieving, we'll get typecast exception, and it is not possible to use it also. So that's the problem. So in order to solve this problem, what Java did is Java introduced something called generics. Generics is nothing but you can attach the type. So once you do the type attachment, right, you can see an error here. At the compilation time only, it is throwing an error. So you can't proceed with this code. You just have to store the strings here. Okay. So what does it mean? So we are attaching the type safety to the collection now. With the generics, we can attach the type element to the collection so that we can store only related elements. But one thing you should understand is the generics, whatever we are attaching the type here, it's a compile time behavior. Means it will be at the compile time, but once you generate the bytecode, you will not find it. Bytecode will contain this one only. The original example which I wrote, no? Bytecode will contain this one only. It will not contain the type safety related thing, because at the compile time only the check is happened. So we don't need to have it in the bytecode and the runtime. So this concept is called type erasure. What does it mean is, once you compile, you will get an error, you will fix everything. Once you generate the bytecode, right? In bytecode, you will not see the type. It will not be available at the runtime also. It is only a compile time behavior. So this removing the type in the bytecode and runtime, right? That is a type erasure. So I hope you got it. At the compile time, we are attaching the type to the collection. At the runtime, it will not be present. At the bytecode also will not be present for some optimization. So this is generics. I hope you understood. Now let's try to answer the question related to array. So question was, can we create a generics array? So let's try to understand generics array part now. So in case of array, right, whatever the type we are attaching. So let's say I want to create an array of integer. So I'll just say this. I'll initialize with some number. Here you can see, right? I have to specify the type here. There is no option. Like in case of this list, right? I had an option to skip this string. But in case of array, it's a mandatory thing. Okay. And it's covariant in nature. In the runtime also, this strong type safety will be attached with the array, unlike the generics what we discussed. So we can't have the generics with the array because generics is a compile time behavior and it supports type erasure. Like in the bytecode, it will not have a type. But in case of array, you should maintain the type throughout the application. So we can't have a generics array. But we can have some hacks to do it, but it's not recommended. Let's say if I go here, right, I have an implementation here. I've created T of array. So here T can be anything. Like whenever you're initializing this class, if you pass it as string, it can be a string array. If you pass it as an integer, it can become an integer array. But if I do T of size directly, right, it is not allowed. That's one thing we should remember. But only the hacking way we can do it. Like we can create new object of this one and we have to typecast it to this T array. So it's not recommended. You can go with some hack way and you can create the generics array. But out of the box, Java will not support the generics array because of the type safety behavior. Because array will have the type safety throughout the code. Like array will support the type safety in compile time as well as in the runtime. So we can't create the generics array. I hope it's very clear to you because concept of generics is completely different. It can't be applied to array. You can go with some hacky way, but it's not recommended. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. So the answer is we can't create the generics array because of the type erasure nature. As we already discussed, at compile time will be present, but when you generate a bytecode and runtime, the type will be erased in the bytecode. It will be plain list or plain set, no type attached. So if you want to use generics, go for some collections, or you can go with some hacky way, but that's not recommended. So if you need a generics property, then use some collection type. Don't go for array. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question.
Let's move to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between inheritance and composition? So this is one of the important interview question. So many of us know about the inheritance, but not many of the people know about the composition. Even though we have used composition in our application, in our day-to-day coding, but we may not be aware what exactly composition means. So let's understand this with some more details. So here I have created an example, okay, to explain both inheritance and composition. So basically inheritance is useful for is a relationship. What does it mean? So here you can see, right? I have an animal class and I have a dog class. So dog is an animal. So to represent these kind of a relationship, inheritance is useful. So it's inheriting all the functionalities of the parent class. So here dog is an animal. So it's completely related with the parent class. So in case of composition, it is useful for has a relationship. What does it mean? Car has an engine. So car as a whole, if you take, it has a lot of other things. Engine is one of the component. So when you have has a relationship, composition can be used. That's another thing. Inheritance introduces type coupling. What does it mean? If there is any change in the parent class, so it will be sent to the child class as well. So child can override and add its own behavior. Otherwise, by default, whatever is available in the parent will be coming to the child. But in case of the composition, the second example here you can see, right? There is no enforcement. So here car can decide what functionalities of the engine it can take. So it is like start is there. Let's say it can have any other functionality. But here in car class, I can decide what to call or what to use. So it's a loose coupling. Okay. And in both the cases, code is reused. So here also we are using the engine's code. Here also we are using the animal's code. So that is one of the common thing between them. So I hope you got it. This is one of the interesting interview question as I already told, and many of the candidates will confuse when they heard about composition. Another advantage is in case of Java, you can extend only one class. But with composition, you don't need to extend the class. You're just using its object and calling the related functionalities. So that is another important advantage. I hope you got it. Let's move to the next question. So we already discussed the differences. So inheritance is for is a relationship. Composition is for has a relationship. So classes extend another class to inherit its functionality. Here you would have to just use the instance of the another class. That's a major thing. And in case of coupling, we already discussed inheritance is bit tight coupling and composition is a weak coupling. So both are used for the code reusability. But in case of inheritance, it is via class hierarchy. Flexibility part also we have discussed. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. Let's move to the next question. So the question is, what happens if we do interrupt on a sleeping thread? So this is an interesting question. Do write interrupted exception when we have a thread.sleep. So let's try to understand what happens if we interrupt the sleeping thread, because not normally we don't interrupt any threads. This is just a learning to see how it behaves. Let's see with an example. Here I've created a thread and I have a few statements here. So first I'm printing thread is going to sleep, because after that I have a thread.sleep statement. Thread sleeps for 5000 milliseconds, that is 5 seconds. If it wakes up naturally, then we have printed this. If there is an interruption, we have this. Okay, and I'm starting the thread here. And this is the, as you know, like whenever we start an application, main thread will be running. So from main thread, we are interrupting. So that's why I have just mentioned main thread is interrupting a sleeper thread. So here we are calling dot interrupt method. So let's run and see what happens. Okay, you can see main thread statement which is interrupting, and thread is going to sleep, and it got interrupted also. So I hope you got it. What's happening is when you call this interrupt, so it will basically wake up the already sleeping thread, so which will lead to interrupted exception, and that's why we are seeing this statement. So I hope it's very clear. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can a lambda expression access local variables? This is an interesting one. Even though we have used lambda extensively, so when we see this question, we'll get a doubt whether it is possible or not. Let's see with an example. So here I have created a lambda expression for runnable. Okay, this you must be knowing. This is a simple way to create a runnable with lambda expression, and it's taking this message as a uh, I would say local variable, and it's doing a print operation. Since it is represented as lambda, you might have confused that this is basically a run implementation. What it is doing is it is an implementation of a runnable interface, and we are overriding the run, and behavior is we are just printing this message. Okay. So here from the example, it looks like this message, whatever we are passing the local variable, right? It is working fine. Maybe I'll just try to run and show you. You can see it's showing hello lambda. That's the message which we are passing to this runnable, and I'm calling the run method. So, but you don't need to worry why that is called, because run I'm directly calling, but you can go with start also, thread dot start. Just avoid the steps I've added like that. So from this example, it looks like message, whatever we are passing, is accessible inside the runnable. So local variable is accessible inside the lambda expression. So if you say this answer, right, then it will clearly showcase that you don't have full context on how lambda works and how it will treat the local variables. I'll explain with some more detail. Okay, so let's say if this message, whatever the variable we have, I'll assign it to something else, some other message, some other, yeah, I can say some other message, just for example. So now you can see it started showing an error. So as soon as I updated it, it started showing an error. What does it mean? This is an interesting example. Okay, in Java, you may not see this kind of behavior in multiple places. This is one of the interesting use case. So when I hover on it, it is clearly saying variable used in the lambda expression should be final or effectively final. What does it mean? Means either it should be declared as final so that you can't change anywhere else. Only once you can assign, and rest of the places you have to use as it is. The second statement is it should be effectively final. What does it mean? Effectively final is also like a final only, but we are not adding final as a keyword in the declaration. So expectation is once it is created, it should not be changed if we update anywhere else in that method, right? So if we update that anywhere else, that will break the effective final principle. So it will give an error. So I hope it's very clear. So lambda can access the local variable only if it is declared as final or effectively final. In normal cases, if it is an immutable variant, lambda can't access it. So this is the answer. So what next you have to ask? So you have to ask yourself why it should be final or effectively final. So that's how you should learn. That's how you should make your fundamentals strong. If you just kind of learn whatever I'm saying, it should be final, and if you go and maybe attend interviews or use day to day, then it's not much useful. Understand why it should be final. So there are main two reasons. One is, let's say we have created this message here, the local variable, and I'm updating here. So what will happen is the behavior of this runnable, whatever the lambda expression I have it, I can't control it. So because this is defined based on the line number 5. So if I'm changing somewhere, then this we don't get the required result. It will give an error in its result. That's the main thing. So that's why lambda expects it to be final. So that's one of the reasons. Second reason is, let's say if you're having some multi-threaded application. So in that case also it can lead to a problem because both of the thread, right? Like let's say we have this function and we have this declaration also. If one thread is making some change here and other thread can come and update here, so we will get some unexpected result. So that is another reason. So mainly in case of threads, we won't get the expected result. Second case, as I told, right, like even in normal flow also, this lambda is created based on this local variable. So if I change this, I don't get the desired result. I hope it's very clear to you. So whenever you are learning anything, right, go little depth, understand why part of it, understand how part of it, so you will have more clarity. So I hope you got it. Let's move on to the next question. So answer is very clear. It should be either effectively final or final. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between submit and execute in executive service? So what is the difference between submit and execute in executive service? So even though we have used the submit and execute in our day-to-day coding, so not many of us have explored the difference between that. Let's try to understand that with some examples. So I have created an example to explain submit and the execute difference. So both of this will come into picture when we are playing with executive servers. Okay. So execute a service, like here what I've done is I've just created a fixed thread pool of 2 threads. Okay. And in the first part, right, I'm using executor dot execute. So here I'm just printing that I'm inside this execute and now the code is running. So I've introduced a sleep here, and here the task is completed. So I'm throwing this exception here. I'll explain you why. And we have this try catch also inside this execute. And I have this executor submit here. So here what I'm doing is same thing. I'm printing the submit running, and I've introduced the sleep, and I have here I'm saying submit is completed. Here also I'm throwing an exception. And you can see this future.get I'm doing on top of submit, and I'm catching some exception and I'm shutting down. Okay, this is the flow. So let's maybe see the output first. After that, I'll explain the difference. So here you can see the first execute is running. After that, submit started running. So, and after that, basically the executor is completed. So here, if I have to show, you can see the first thing is execute started and submit started running, and execute completed, and even submit is also completed after a point. But in between, what is happening is I'm throwing an exception in the execute, right? That's what is coming here. And I'm throwing an exception even in submit also, but there you don't see any exception like this, because we have this catch block here. We are printing caught exception from the submit, and we are printing the result as well. Okay. So now let's try to understand the difference. The first, I'll start with what is common. So in case of executor.submit and executor.execute, right, both are used to run the task. So here task can be of type runnable or callable. So both are used to run that. Now let us try to understand the difference. Okay. So first we have to understand this execute. So if I go inside this method, right, you can see this execute method is part of the executor interface. So second thing is it is taking runnable as the argument. Third thing is it is returning void. So I'll just repeat. It's part of executor interface. It takes runnable as an argument. It returns void. Okay. So what it means? Basically, in case of executor.execute, it will not return anything. Let's say if you want to return something from this execution, you can't do it. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing, let's say here we are getting some exception. So even this exceptions also, you can't propagate this to caller. You have to handle here itself. Okay, so these are the main things we should understand. Let's say in case of executor.submit. So if I go inside the submit, right, you can see it's part of executor service. Even though it is extending executor, it is having an extra method because this is also an interface. So it's supporting the submit, and it takes callable as the argument. What does it mean? Callable supports return types. And here also, even in case of return type, right, it is returning future, which means the result of this execution of the submit is returned to the caller. Okay. So here you can clearly see, right? We are sleeping here for 500 seconds and we are throwing an exception, but we are not catching any exception, unlike here, because this whole submit, if there is any exception, it will send it to the caller through future. Even it can return some value also. If there is an exception, even exception also it can propagate to the caller. So what we are doing here is future.get we are doing. So get is a blocking call. So we are calling get to get the result, and if there are some exceptions, right, we are basically catching that here. So we are not catching inside the submit, we are catching outside as part of this future.get, and we are handling it in a better way. Here we don't have much control, like if some unknown exception comes here, right? So we can't do anything, but here we can have some better exception handling strategies. We'll have more control. If we need some value to be returned from the executor, go for executor.submit. Here, in case of executor.executor, it's like a fire and forget. So you'll start the execution. You don't know whether it will succeed or failure because it will not return anything. So here we'll have more control in case of submit. In case of executor or shutdown, so it will basically what it does is it will uh, basically shut down the previously submitted tasks and it will not take the new tasks. So, and if it is already shut down, you can call it again. It will not create any problem. That's another thing you should know. So a better way is like you can go for even await termination also. You can wait for the termination. After that, you can call shutdown also. I hope you got it. So basically, if you want to wait for the threads to complete before you call shutdown, so let's say if your requirement is, let's say the existing task to be completed before calling shutdown, then you can use await termination. After that, you can shut down. Okay. I hope now you understood the complete difference between the submit and execute. Main difference lies in the return type. Executor.execute method will not return anything, but submit will return even exceptions and the values as well. I hope this is very clear to you. What I would recommend is go depth so that you can understand better. Let's move on to next question. To answer, it's very clear. Submit will returns the future and it can catch the exception. Execute does not return anything. Uncaught exceptions may terminate the thread. So this is an important thing. So I hope you got it. Let's move on to next question. Let's see the next question. So the question is, can we start thread twice? This is one of the famous question asked in many interviews. So still many people will not tell the correct answer. So let's see with an example. Here I've created a thread. Okay. So as I always say, whenever you're creating thread, go with implementing runnable. Don't extend the thread. So because Java will not support you to extend two classes, but you can extend any number of interfaces. So that should be the first thing. So I'll just run this. Okay. What I've done is I've created a thread and I'm just starting and I'm printing the thread name. That's it. So you can see running in thread 0. So before I go and call the start method twice, I'll just go to the documentation and show you what it says. This is how you should understand the functionality. Okay. You can see when you click on the start, it schedules this thread to begin the execution. Thread will execute independently of the current thread. Okay. So thread can be started at most once. So in particular, a thread cannot be restarted after it has terminated. Okay. So it throws illegal thread state exception if thread was already started. Okay. So this is the thing, like if the thread is already started, and if you try to start it again, it will throw illegal thread state exception. That's first thing. If the thread is terminated, then also you can't start that thread. That's also not possible. So we have to understand the why part of it. Mainly because in case of thread, right, thread will have a life cycle. So it will be, for example, when you create it, it will be the new state. When you start, it will go to runnable or running state. So blocked, waiting. So there are different states. So you can't bring back to the previous state. Okay, you should move in that life cycle only. So if it is started running, right, you can't again run it. It's already running. So that's why you are not supposed to start the thread twice. So I'll just write that example and show you. So you can see it's new dot start. I've done, and let me run this thread. You should see an exception saying illegal thread state exception. You can clearly see here the exception is thrown. So first time it was running fine, but second time when I tried, it started throwing an exception. So I hope you got it. So basically you can't start the same thread second time. It will throw an exception. And why part also I have explained because of the thread lifecycle. So once it is in certain state, you can't bring back to some other state because there is an order of the execution. So I hope you got it. Let's move on to the next question. Answer is no, you cannot start a thread twice in Java. If you attempt to do so, Java will throw an illegal thread state exception. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between volatile and atomic integer? This is one of the, I would say, interesting and tough thread questions for many actually. Even though you guys have read about it, but still I have seen 90% of the candidates will fail to answer the difference between volatile and integer correctly. So let's see with some examples and understand the differences. So before I go and explain about volatile example, right, I'll just give you a theory. So I'll first explain it orally. So volatile is used to solve the visibility problem. Let's say there is a boolean flag is there, and initially maybe it is true, and the first thread, right, has changed the value of flag to false. There is another thread called T2. So what value T2 will see? T2 will get basically true itself. So for T2, flag values true itself. So mainly because flag value true is in the memory. Okay, this is in the memory. So whenever a thread makes changes, like here, T1 set the flag to false. But this will not immediately reflect in T2 because this T1 store this false in its cache. So this T1 store this value in the thread cache initially. Later it will flush this value to the memory. But by the time thread 2 have already got the value of the flag as true, but actual value is false. So this is the problem statement. So one way you can do is you can go with synchronization and you can lock the entire block of the code and you can make it thread safe. Other way is you can use volatile. So if I make this volatile, okay, if I make this variable as volatile, what will happen? Whenever a thread make any changes to this value, so let's say if it is set as false, right? So this will not be stored in the cache, it will directly go to the memory as false. So this will be in the memory. So another thread, when it tries to read the value of flag, right, it will get false as the value. So basically what volatile does is whenever a thread makes changes to a variable, its value will be stored in the memory directly instead of cache so that other threads will get the correct value. So that's the main use case. Let's see with an example. Okay, so here in this, right, I have created a volatile boolean flag as false here, and the first thread is called a setter thread. So here I have introduced a sleep of 1000 milliseconds, and I'm setting the flag as true, and I'm even printing that flag is set to true by the setter thread. Okay, so here waiter thread, what will it will be keep on waiting for the flag. So if the flag value becomes true here, right, it will come out of this while loop and print this. So current value of the flag is false. So basically this will go on in an infinite loop. So when the first thread makes the value to true because of the volatile nature, this value will reflect in the second thread also because it will read from the memory, and it will end this infinite loop and it will print the statement saying whether the detected flag is true. So here we are starting both the threads, wait a thread and set a thread. I'll just run this example and show you. So here you can see it was keep on printing false for some time. False means it was inside this while loop. So this waiter was inside the while loop. But at one point, when the flag was set to true by setter thread, immediately waiter thread detected it and exited. So I hope you got it. So here, because of the volatile thing, right? As soon as the first thread updates the value, second thread picked up that value because it was visible to second thread. So volatile is used to solve the visibility problem. So whenever a thread makes any changes to variable, its value will be returned to the main memory so that other threads will get the recent appropriate values. But let's say I'll give you another example. Here I have created another class. So here I have a class called volatile counter. Okay. So I have a count variable. I'm just running this with 1,000 times. So basically this is a thread. Okay. Volatile counter is a thread which is implementing the runnable. What I'm doing is I'm creating two threads on that, T1 and T2. For both of that, I'm passing this counter. Okay. And I'm starting the thread and I'm joining and I'm printing the final count of it. So each of the thread will go and run this 10,000 times and print the result. So I'll just run this and show you the result. You can see we got 15,323. See here we got 15,323. I'm running it again. So we got some other value. So every time when I run, I'll get some different value. What it means is this is not thread safe. Okay. So if I have to make it thread safe, right? So let's say if I change this to volatile. So what happens in case of volatile? Whenever a thread makes changes to value, it will be immediately reflects in the another thread. That's the actual behavior. So when I run this, so here you can see we got some 18,000 change. When I run it again, I got something else. When I run it again, I got something else. Means volatile is also not solving this problem. Still, this code is not thread safe. It is printing unexpected values only. Then how to make this thread safe? One way is we have to synchronize this execution and we can make it thread safe. But let's say interviewer asks you, can we do without using synchronization? So yes, you can do. What you can do is instead of this volatile, you can go for something called atomic integer. So here I'll just create an atomic integer with value 0. And here instead of count plus plus, you use something called increment and get. That's it. So I'll just run this code and show you the result. It is printed 20,000. So I'll just print one more time. Again 20,000. Third time I'm running 20,000. So basically it is consistently resulting 20,000. What does it mean? So this atomic integer is making this code thread safe. Let's try to understand how it is working. So basically, whatever the increment operation I had initially, right, like count plus plus, maybe count minus minus, these are not atomic in nature. Means it's not one operation. Like in case of first example, right, updating a flag, it's just one operation. You are just assigning it, writing it. But in case of this counter, what will happen is when you do count plus plus, there are three operations happen. One is read the count, and second is update the count, and third operation is basically write the count. So it's basically write the count back to the memory. So I'll just comment it and explain. So here first read is happening. After that we are updating, means count plus 1 is happening. This we are writing back to the memory. So three operations we have performed. So this is not atomic in nature. So what this atomic integer does, it will make count plus plus as atomic. That's why we are calling a count increment and get. We are not calling count plus plus. We are using atomic integer. It has its own function called increment and get. Internally, it uses a concept called compare and swap. So that's how it will make this code thread safe. I hope you got it. So this is one of the classic and interesting interview question. When to use volatile, when to use atomic integer. Many of the candidates will struggle and give wrong answer. Atomic integer, right? It has its own performance issues. So in the latest versions of the Java, after Java 8 onwards, so they introduced different so Java introduced better versions. It's called as long adder, long accumulator. So these are all better in terms of performance as well as thread safe for non-atomic operations. So it will convert it into atomic and make it thread safe, and it will work faster compared to atomic integer. So this is what the bonus point. So whenever you are learning anything, right, see what is there any latest changes are introduced. Don't just stick on to whatever is available in 100 other tutorials. Explore what is available in the latest versions of programming language or framework so that you can keep yourself up to date. I hope it's very clear to you. Explore long adder, long accumulator after this tutorial. Understand how it works, how it is better than atomic integer, what techniques it uses internally to make it more performant. Go and check it out. I hope this is very clear. So let's move on to the next question. The answer is very clear. Volatile is basically to handle the visibility problem. So it does not work for operations like x plus plus, x minus minus, increment, decrement, etc. It's only suitable for one-time update like flags, status update, etc. Atomic integer, it basically is compare and swap, make the operation atomic, and it will make thread safe. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between map and flat map? So this is one of the interesting Java concept we have used in our day-to-day coding also, but not many of us will not be aware of the exact difference between map and flat map. So let's try to understand that with some examples. So here I've created examples for flat map and map. So I'll just briefly explain. So map is used for the transformation and flat map is used for the flattening purpose. So that's one of the important thing we should understand. So in this example, right, I have a words list. So what I'm doing is I'm basically passing it to map, getting its length, like every word's length and printing it here. So transformation, like it's taking string as an input and it's basically getting the length for every string and printing. It can be any operation. It will take R as an input, T as the output. So it's doing a transformation. It will take one and transform it to another and print it. But in case of flat map, what will happen is here if you see that we have list of lists. So I've created 3 ArrayLists here, and out of which I'm creating list of list. And I'm streaming it here. I'm using flat map. So it's basically taking stream of list of integers. Okay, because once you start streaming, every iteration will get list of integer, and that we are flattening. So that's what is done here, and we are printing it here. So I'll maybe just comment this for the time being. After that, I'll explain that example. So basically in the first example, we are doing a transformation. Second is a flattening. So let's see what it means. First example, you can see, okay, because of the sysout, it is printing in this order. So let's do one thing. Let's maybe you can say to list, and I'm taking this as list of integers. I can say word length, and same thing here as well. I'll just take list of integers, flat on list. Okay, so here also I'll just transfer. Also I'll say it is to list. Okay, let's print both here. This is out. First one I'm printing word length array, and Second, I'll print this list of lists. Second, I'll print this flat-round list. So let's run it. You can see that first is a word length, that is 463, and second is a flattened list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9. So let's try to understand better. So basically it has taken all the list of strings and it calculated the length and printed. So it has done the transformation. Here it is flattening. So it has taken list of lists and it has flattened it to one single list. So I hope you understood the difference. So if you need transformation, go for map. If you need flattening, go for flatMap. If you need both, then use both in your code as a combination. So basically, map is used to transform each element of the string individually. So flatMap is mostly used for the flattening purpose. You can do some amount of transformation, but flattening is the main use case of the flatMap. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. The question is, what is the contract between equals and hashcode method? So this is another famous question, and I've seen many candidates will get confused. Here I'll not go for any examples, but I'll explain it orally only. So basically, so if two objects are equals, then hashcode will be same. Okay, I'm repeating again. If two objects are equals, hashcode will be same. But if two hashcodes are same, that doesn't mean that objects will be equal. So I'll explain a little better. So if let's say two objects when we are comparing equals, it is returning true. That means hashcode will also be same. But if hashcode values are same, that doesn't mean that equals method will return true. Okay, that's the main thing you should understand. So if you are overriding equals, override hashcode as well. That's mandatory to get the better comparison, to compare the objects efficiently. Okay, especially if you're using some of your object as a key to the hash map, override equals in hash code correctly so that you can store and retrieve the values correctly. So we have already covered all the three pointers. So I hope you understood the contract between equals and hash code clearly here. Let's move to the next question. Let's move to the next question. The question is how to stop a thread. So I'll just repeat the question, how to stop a thread. Let's try to understand with an example. So the question is how to stop a thread. Normally, right, in our day-to-day activities, we will not write a code to stop the thread. But this may be useful in some use cases, and even it can come in interview as a interesting interview question as well. Let's try to understand how you can stop a thread. So I'm explaining a couple of ways by using which we can stop a thread. Okay. So here I've created a thread by implementing runnable, and I have this run method, and I have added this while condition. It is taking running as the variable. So this is of type volatile. Okay, this is one thing you should remember. So in case of volatile, if a thread makes a changes to volatile variable, another thread will also get its value instantly because it will update the original thread will update the value directly to the memory. So other threads will get the latest value from memory. That's the main thing. So here what we are doing is in this run method, while running, I'm basically checking if this running is true, then only run this. Let's say at any point if this running is set to false, then we are stopping the thread. This is a better way to gracefully kind of stopping the thread. So I have introduced a method called stop. Okay, in the stop, I'm changing the value of the running to false. So here I have created a thread. I'm starting the thread at this point and I'm calling stop also. So let's run and see the output. You can see thread is stopped. So what we are doing here is we are basically calling this. So thread is running, and as soon as you call this stop, it will stop. Maybe like if you want, you can introduce some delay to basically check it. But here you may not be seeing this thread is running because immediately stop is called, right? So immediately it has exited. So you can introduce some delay and you can play with it. So thread stop. I hope you got it. So as soon as you call the stop, right, we are changing this volatile variable value to false. So as soon as this becomes false, this while loop will not be executed and it will run the thread.stop line. Okay. So this is one way to stop it. So another way is we can go with interrupted exception as well. This we have discussed a little while ago. So here I have created a thread, and inside this what I'm doing is I'm checking, is the current thread interrupted? If so, exit. So I have a check. So same as this boolean check, correct, running, I'm having a check around the interruption. If the current thread is interrupted, if so, then exit. If not, continue this while loop. Okay. So here what I'm doing is I'm starting a thread and I'm interrupting after that. So let me run this and show you. So you can see thread is exiting because immediately I'm calling interrupt, right? That is the reason. So you can introduce some delay and you can play with it. So this is another way. What we are doing here is we are checking if the thread is interrupted. If not, run this while loop. If it is interrupted, then call this thread exiting. So this is another way to stop it. So you guys can ask me a question. So whether thread will not have any stop method directly, why we have to do all this? It has a stop method. But if you go here, right, it's deprecated since 1.2 of the Java version. That's the first thing. And it's not recommended to basically execute the stop method because we will not get we may see some inconsistent state, we may get some undesired result. So it's not recommended. So you can see you can go with interrupt method also to interrupt the thread, that's fine. Don't use stop method. So Java will not recommend to use stop method. So either you can go with interrupt option or you can go with the first option, that is with volatile. So these two ways you can gracefully stop the threads. I hope you got it. This is one of the interesting problem because many of the candidates thinks there should be stop method directly which can be used because in day to day we don't try to stop any thread. So this is one interesting problem to know. Let's move on to next question. Answer is we have to use either volatile flag or we can go with interrupted exception format. So avoid thread.stop. It's not safe and it's already deprecated. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. Let's go for next question. The question is, can you create a thread without extending the thread class or implementing runnable? This is an interesting question because normally we create thread using these two techniques. Is there any other way? Even though we might have done it, but in the interview, right, we'll get confused. Is there any other way to create it? Let's see with some examples. So here I have provided two examples. So the first thread we are creating using anonymous in a class. Here we are not extending the thread class or implementing the runnable, but we are going with anonymous in a class and creating a thread. This is one way. Second way is easiest way is using lambda expressions. You can see this is another way we can do it without extending or implementing. So let's run it. You can see it will print both the threads are running, one with lambda, one with basically anonymous in a class. I hope you got it. We have created threads using this way, but still in the interview, right, we'll get a little confused. So threads you can even create using anonymous in a class and lambda expression along with extending the thread class and implementing the runnable. I hope this is very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. So the answer is yes, using anonymous in a class or using lambda expression. We got to know that. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what happens if we call notify but no thread is waiting? So this is an interesting question. What happens if we call notify but no threads are waiting? Before we go and understand the example, right? First thing you have to understand about the wait and notify. First thing is you should know about wait and notify. What happens in this case? So what thread does is it will release the lock on the object and it will wait for the notification or notify signal. So what notify does is, so this notify will send signal to any random thread which is waiting. Okay, so that's the basic concept you should understand. So here, right, in this example, you can see what we have done is there is no wait. Okay, no any threads are waiting here. So we have basically taken lock on this object called lock, and inside that we are calling notify. So notify is from the object class. So we are calling. So what it does is it will look for any threads which are waiting. It will notify. It will send the signal. But here no any threads are waiting. So signal will be lost. It will not create any problem. Okay. So let's take this example. Here what we are doing is in this thread, right, we are waiting here. So means this thread has released the lock and waiting for the notification or notify. Basically waiting for the notify signal. Okay. So here we are starting the wait thread here and we have introduced a sleep of 100 milliseconds. After that, what we are doing is we are calling notify. So at this time, what will happen is there is already one thread which is waiting, this one. So this thread will be notified. So this thread will wake up and execute this last step. Okay, I'll just run and show you. So you can see the first statement is calling notify when no thread is waiting. So we call the notify and we are printing notify is called but no thread is waiting because no any threads are waiting here. Second statement. So here we have started this thread and the thread is going to wait. That's what we have printed. Okay, means at this point thread has released the lock. It can't continue the execution. But when this notify is called from the steps, you can see calling notify when thread is waiting. That's what we are printing here. So once we call this notify, what will happen is there is a waiting thread, that is this thread. This thread will get the control back and it will print the thread was notified statement. That's what the last statement here. I hope it's clear. So in case of wait, we'll release the lock and wait for the notify signal. And notify will notify the any random thread which is waiting. So I hope it's very clear to you. So basically, if you call notify or notify all, even when the thread is not waiting, it will not create any problem. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. Answer is nothing happens, no exception is thrown. The signal simply lost. The notify signal will be lost. That's it. So let's move on to the next question. And the next question is, what are the different ways to write thread safe code? So we'll try to understand this with some examples. So here in this class, I have taken different ways to create thread safe code. So we'll start with a basic one. So using the synchronize keyword. So here I have applied on top of a method. So you can use synchronization on top of a method. So this is one way to basically create thread safe code. Here only one thread at a time can get into this and access this. Okay. So here what will happen is in case of synchronized on the method level, so only one thread can get inside the method, all the other thread has to wait. But if you go at the block level, so let's say here, right, till this point, till line number 40, all the threads can get in. So it can perform all the logics here. Only at this junction, one thread can go inside and perform the action and move out. So this is a little better compared to taking the lock on the entire method. So lock on the block of code is always recommended. So this is one way to write the thread safe code. Let's understand the other ways. So another way is using the locks. So here you can see we have taken the lock and we'll perform some operation and we'll have the finally block to unlock it. So why we need finally block is mainly because to avoid infinite holding of the locks. Let's say we are performing some operation here and some exception came and this lock is not released. So other thread cannot get inside. So that's why we will safely unlock it. Okay. So this is another way to create the thread safe code, that is using explicit locking. Third way is using atomic integer or long adder or accumulators. So by using which we can create the thread safe code. So this is applicable only certain kind of operation. Let's say here we are doing increment. If we want to make only this operation thread safe, we can go for this. Other way is using the volatile keyword. So volatile, as you know, right? If it is a Boolean kind of a variable, volatile will have to basically assures the thread safety. If one thread updates this value, in other thread also it will reflect because it will read it from the memory. The first thread will write it to the main memory. Second thread will get this data from the main memory. So data will be in sync. So data will be in sync. And the last option is using the concurrent hash map. So basically using a collection type which is thread safe, inherently thread safe. Concurrent hash map is one of them. And one more option is using the immutable data, but this is not applicable always because sometimes we may have to change the data, but this is one way. Let's say if it is allowed, go for immutable object so that no any thread can change it. Because if a thread changes this immutable object, new object will be created. So that's another way. But primarily, if you ask me, synchronization, locking, atomic integer, volatile, and thread safe collections are heavily used. I hope you got it. Even though we have used this in day-to-day coding, right? We will not be able to recall quickly in the interview time. And this is really useful even for day-to-day also. Let's say if you're not aware of all these techniques, I would strongly recommend go and check out. Try to use it. Because many times what will happen is people will just stick on to synchronized block or synchronized method. So there are other ways you can create better thread safe code, which are more efficient in terms of performance as well. Compared to synchronized, for example, this concurrent hash map is better. Locking has its own advantages. So I would strongly recommend try to explore all the options, understand how everything works, and use whatever is relevant to your requirement. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. So the answer I've already captured using synchronization, logs, atomic variable, volatile, immutable variables, and some thread safe collections. Let's move to the next question. Let's move to the next question. So the question is, what are the different ways to create an object? This is an interesting question because this is also asked in many companies. So normally what will happen is in day-to-day work, right, we'll create object using one way. But are there any other ways we can create an object? Yes, there are different ways to create an object. Let's try to understand that with some examples. So here, right, I have listed on few of the ways to create an object. The first one is a straightforward one using new keyword. That's what we normally do. Second one is using reflection. So here we are using class one name and we are creating new instance. This is basically a plain one with default constructor. But if you want to pass some parameters, there are ways to do it. And third one is using cloning. So what we are doing is here we are taking this object one and we are cloning it and getting the object two. So this is another way to create an object. So the next way is using deserialization. So here you can see we are reading the object from this file and that we are deserializing and creating this object. So this is another way to create an object. The last way is we can even go with some factory method. Let's say if we have some factory class, we can call create instance. That mostly may use new itself, but this is another way to create an object. So I hope you understood what are the different ways to create the object. And just an information, whenever using reflection or cloning or deserialization, some exceptions will be thrown. So that's what I'm throwing from this method, just an FYI. So I hope you got it. There are different ways we can create an object, but normally this is the one which is heavily used. And let's say if you go to Spring Boot world, then you can go with auto wiring. By using that also you can create objects. So, but here we are discussing with plain Java ways. So I hope you got it. Let's move on to next question. So the question is, can a lambda expression throw an exception? So let's say when you're writing a lambda expression, can it throw an exception? So as I always say, even though we have used some of these things, right? So we will not be very confident on answering these kind of questions. Let's see with some examples and understand it and make our fundamental stronger. So here I have created a couple of variants of the lambda to explain different examples. So different to explain the different types of exceptions. So here we are iterating on the numbers and dividing 10 by the I. I is nothing but the value of the array. So when 10 by 0 happens, we'll see exception. The second one is, so here exception will be thrown. I'll run and show you. It will throw runtime exception. Second one is basically here what we are doing is it's the same example. How to handle it is using a try catch. This is one way to do it. Normally for runtime exceptions, right? Better way to handle is having the checks. So here I should not be equals to 0. If I equals to 0, don't divide 10 by I. That's why you have to write the logic. So right way is using this check. If I is not equals to 0, then only run this. So this is the right way to handle it. Okay. Third example is here we are having some number. This is from this interface. Okay, lambda is throwing checked exceptions. So first examples, whatever we have seen, and those are all runtime exceptions. If it is a checked exception, right, we have to declare that as part of the method declaration itself in the function interface. So if this method is throwing the exception as part of this function interface, even it is applicable for general methods also. So it's better to include that so that like the user of this lambda will be aware that they have to catch the exception. Because if we remove this line, right, all this try catch, we'll get compilation error. So it's always good to mention the throws and exception type if the lambda is throwing checked exception. Same thing applicable for even the normal methods as well. Unchecked, it is handled here. So no any need of any changes. I hope it's very clear. Let me run and show you. So you can see it has stopped at the first itself arithmetic exception. So I'll just comment this because runtime exception is thrown when we try 10 by 0 division. So now you can see we got exception. So now you can see we got exception here because this method is throwing an exception. Lambdas can throw unchecked exception, but if it's checked exception, it's good to declare as part of the method. So none of the Java library functions. So none of the Java library function interfaces will throw exception. This is just an FYI. But if you have such a requirement, add it in your method declaration. So it will be useful, and those who are using your method will be aware how to handle it. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. Unchecked exceptions can be directly thrown. Checked exception, it requires to be declared as a method declaration, and it's advised to use try catch blocks inside the lambdas to handle the exceptions. So that's the recommendation. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. So the question is, what is the difference between thread, sleep, and wait? I'm not going to explain with example. I'll directly explain here itself. So basically, thread.sleep is from the thread class and wait is from the object class. That is fundamental difference. We have to understand the purpose. So thread.sleep basically it pauses the current thread for a specific time. So it specify the duration with which thread has to sleep. But in case of wait, what will happen is it will release the lock. So it will release the lock and it will wait for the notify or notify all signals. Then only it will wake up and do the remaining execution. So thread.sleep will not release any lock. It will just sleep for some time. That's it. But in case of wait, as I already told, it will release the locks. And so thread.sleep can be called from anywhere. No need of synchronization context. But wait requires a synchronized block or a method. It will be within that. So once the thread sleep duration is done, it will wake up. So if there is an interrupt, then also thread will wake up. In case of wait, what will happen is if there is any notify or notify all signal comes in, then it will wake up. Okay. And so thread.sleep is a static method. That's just a basic difference. And wait is a instance method. So thread.sleep is not used for any inter-thread communication, but wait and notify are used for the inter-thread communication. Like we'll say like this thread is releasing a log, so other thread can pick up. So that is a communication happens. So in sleep it is just it will sleep for some time and after that it will wake up and continue the execution. I hope you understood the difference between thread sleep and wait methods. So let's move on to the next question. So the question is, can we use break or continue inside a lambda expression? So this is an interesting one because normally I think we have not explored this. So even though we have used lambda, I don't think we have explored whether we can use break or continue. So let's see the answer. So basically inside the lambda, you can't use break and continue because these are all called as control flow statements. We can't use it. It will be used normally inside the loops and switches. So if you need it, then you have to restructure the logic. You can't use the lambda. But there is a small alternative. Let's say if you need continue, instead you can use return statement. So I have written a small example to explain that. Here what I've done is I've written a small example. If like for example n equals to 3, I'm returning. So normally continue is used in this use cases only. So instead of that, you can use a return if you need that kind of a behavior. That's one example, or that is one way you can achieve that. But you can't use any break or anything. So you can't like add continue. Like for example, here I'll add continue, then I'll get an exception. So we can't do it. And at the same time, I can't break also. So that's also not allowed. I hope you got it. So basically all the control statements like break, continue, we can't do it. So just to mimic the continue, we can use return. That's one option available. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's move to the next question. So basically it's not allowed. We have to restructure our logic. Let's see the next question. Let's move to the next question. So the question is, can we create static class in Java? So even though we have created a lot of classes, this is again a tricky one. Many may say yes, but is it really yes? Let's see with an example. Let's try to create a static class. Maybe we can call it as an example. We can do this. You can see we are getting an error. Modify static is not allowed here. So basically you can't create a static top level class. So that is the thing you should understand. Then what can be done? We can have static inner class or nested class. So you can see top level class is non-static here. But I've created an inner class or nested class is static. This is perfectly allowed. So I'm basically creating an instance of it. So I have not created an instance of the main class, okay, but I can directly create an instance of the static class and I can perform actions on it. So I can just show you and let's see the output. So you can see it is working fine. So basically you can have static inner class, but you can't have the static at the top level class. So that is a contract. And to create the instance of the static class, you just have to use top level class dot static class name and you can create it. You don't need the outer class to be created. So that's another important thing. I hope this is very clear to you. Let's move on to the next question. We got the answer. Only nested classes or inner classes can be declared as static. Top level classes cannot be static. Let's move on to the next question. Let's see the next question. Can two different objects have same hash code but different equals? So I'll just explain the contract, because if you know the contract clearly, then you can answer it well. We have already covered, but I'll try to cover it briefly. So what contract says, if equals is returning true, hash code will be same always. But if hash code is returning true, that doesn't mean that equals should be returning true always. So it is clearly stated. So two different objects can have same hash code, but it doesn't mean that equals should be same. So if you know the concept of collision, especially with the hash map, right, you can answer this well. Because in case of hash map, when you add two different keys, if they have same hash code, it will lead to collision. So what we do is we store the details in the linked list till size 8. If it is crossing that, we'll move that to red black tree. So this is an optimization. It's introduced in Java 8. So the conclusion is, so the answer is yes, two different objects can have same hash code, but different equals result. That is expected. Let's move on to the next question. Let's move on to the next question. Can static methods access instance variables? So even though we have written public static void main many times, so this may confuse some folks. Let's try to understand with an example. So here, right, I've created an instance variable, and when I try to access from the static method, I'll get an error. So you can clearly say it is non-static field we are trying to access inside the static field. So it's not allowed. So basically, as you know, the static keyword, right? Whenever you see static means even it is variable or method, it's bound to class. It's not bound to method. And instance variable is attached to an object. So you can't access something which is attached to object directly. But what other way you can do is you can create an instance of that. So here I've created an instance of the static variable class and I'm trying to access. This is allowed, but directly you can't access, which means, so to access the instance variable, you need an object. Then only you can access. Otherwise, you can't do it because static is bound to class, not to the object. I hope it's very clear to you. So this is one of the interesting thing. But let's say if it is a static variable, so this is another variant interviewer may ask. So maybe I'll say it is 20 and I have a non-static method, public void example, and here I can directly access the static method. This is allowed because static is bound to class. It can be accessed by any methods, any objects, but other way around is not true. So if you want to access the objects instance variable, you need an object instance. So you should understand what is the scope of static keyword, and you should understand how object and instance variables are different, or the scope is different. Let's move to the next question. So the answer is no, static method belongs to class, cannot access instance variable without an object reference. Okay, that's clear. Let's move to the next question. Let's move to the next question. So the question is, what is the default value of an uninitialized local variable in Java? So normally, right, like this is a bit tricky in nature because as we know, right, if we create variables, it will have some default value. Like for int, there is some default, there is some default value for string. But here we are specifically asking local variable. Okay, let's try to understand with an example. Here you can see, right? I've created a local variable and I'm trying to access it here. I'm getting an error, compilation error. So variable X might not have initialized. So what does it mean? What does it mean is local variables must be initialized. Why? Because this local variable is stored within the stack. Once this method execution is done, it will be removed from it. So you can't attach some value to it. So let's say if it is a global variable of type instance, like here I would say XYZ, and if I try to access this XYZ here, right, I need an object. Maybe I'll create an object here. Local variable, and I'm doing new local variable here. So now, if I try to access that XYZ local variable dot XYZ, I'm not seeing any error because if it is at the global level of type instance, it will be stored in heap. So there will be some default values. But if it is a local variable, it is part of the stack memory. Once the execution is done, that method's execution is done, it will be removed from the memory itself. So that's why it will not be initialized with any default values to avoid any future issues. And even let's say if it was static. So if it is a static value also, there will be default values because it will be stored in a main memory. So let's remove this guy and I'll just run and show you. So you can see we have got some default value for this one also. So answer is pretty clear. If it is a local variable, you should initialize. If it is a global instance variable or global static variable, so even if you don't initialize also, there will be default values attached to it. I hope it's very clear to you. Let's see the answer. So the answer is compilation error. Local variables must be initialized before use. I hope you got it.
Finally, we came to the end of tricky Java interview questions. So we have covered 75 plus questions as promised, and these questions are asked many times in the interview, and it's tricky in nature, as I told in the beginning also. So this is helpful to crack any Java interviews. So thank you so much for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to the channel, as well as share this video with your friends so that everybody should get benefited. If you have any suggestions, comments, then please add it in the comment section. It will be helpful for us to improve our video. So thank you so much for your time.